Uh, we'll wait for the mini exodus of people who don't want to stay for the discussion. All right. We'll straight away go into the discussion. Aafreedi has kindly agreed to steer us through this session. May I request Dr. Aafreedi to take his seat as one of the panelists. He's a researcher in Indo-Judaic studies and Jewish-Muslim relations activist, presently associated with the Department of History at Presidency University. He has, of course, several contributions to journals and publications to his credit. I'm not going through all the details now because that will take quite a long time. Man of many achievements, and also perhaps a right man here to steer us through this discussion. Maybe you should take the center seat over there so that you can have the panelists on both sides of you.
I was just thinking that if I take the corner seat, all the panels would be visible to me at once.
Wonderful, that's fine. Then it will be a question remaining of who is going to be cornered over there. Right. Okay. So then as the filmmaker, I would like Subha Das Mollick to also take a seat in the panel. Subha Das Mollick, apart from being the maker of the film today, has made other films also before, one on the Queen's piano or piano, the history of piano as such, you see, and which was also hugely successful. She has been a lecturer at the St. Xavier's College in earlier years in the Department of Mass Communication and Videography, and also been teaching at the institution called iLead. Presently, she is a live wire and the moving spirit behind a very dynamic institution called Vichitra Pathshala, of which she is the secretary, which is propagating and spreading different kind of education, saying that cinema in the classroom, innovative lesson plans, and so on. So thank you very much for being with us here to share your views. And of course, the people whom you saw in the film, I would request them to take their seat also, Jael, Silliman, and Flower Silliman. She currently works as a consultant on gender and development, women of color and reproductive rights, and gender and environment issues. Apart from the fact that she already has a couple of books to her credit, you saw her in the film reading from one of her books, which was on the subject of the film itself. And of course, you will occasionally see her column in the editorial page of the Telegraph. She has also given us the pleasure of launching a website on the Jewish community in Calcutta here at the Victoria Memorial. I don't remember which year that was in. That was the year before last, was it?
3 years ago.
2015, right. Okay. And her mother, Flower Silliman, of course, I don't need to say anything about you. You saw all about her in the film and how she went through all the travails between the formative and impressionable ages of 10 and 17 in this city of Calcutta. And of course, last but not the least, may I request Mr. Ian Zachariah, my very dear friend, to take his seat on the panel. Ian is from the world of advertising. Earlier has been a writer for food and travel also later, and one of the best brains we have in Calcutta, very much in demand as far as quizzing in Calcutta is concerned. Just about everything under the sun he knows something about. And you heard him in the film. You will hear him again here also. He was a little late in joining us because he had a doctor's appointment and could not get here earlier. Okay, I hand over the proceedings to our moderator, Dr. Aafreedi.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Indo-Judaic studies has been my consuming passion for 17 years. And I haven't seen a documentary film on Baghdadi Jews better made than the one we just saw. Writing comments from each of our panelists on this documentary film. So shall I start with the senior most of the panelists, Mrs. Silliman, to...
I'm almost 90 years old, probably the oldest person in the room. And I have seen through most of the last century. And I don't know that I have seen it grow from good to better. It's gone from bad to worse. And I won't say very much more. I would like to answer any questions you may have, or any thing that perhaps you saw in the film and did not understand or wanted to know more about, and I'd be very glad to answer them.
Dr. Silliman, may I?
Same, I'm happy to answer questions. I think there's plenty of stuff in Subha's film for you to ask questions.
I'm not waiting for you asking me questions yet. The Jewish community, even though we are as small as we are, right, are not going to fade away into the sunset right yet. We will still be in Calcutta. We will still make a mark. We will still talk about it. Because over the years, there has been a base laid down in many areas. You know, you will find it in the constructions, in buildings. You will find it in our constructions. You will find it in a lot of thinking of a lot of people. We are, yes, a small community, but we have a lot of strength, and we will, as far as possible, let people see what was once the glory of the Jewish community in Calcutta. So it's all there to see. If you would like to visit, it's there. There is a lock on it, as Jael pointed out, and that's for security reasons, but we will be happy if you came to visit.
Thank you.
Can I say one question, one point? The lock was about 14 years ago when that book was written. Now the Jewish community synagogues are open to the public except on Saturdays, so you're welcome to go anytime. And of course the schools are running schools, so you can't go. But the synagogues are open, so please do go. It's 9 to 5 except on Saturdays, because now we have a rabbi who has come as part of a commercial enterprise. And so he says prayers on Friday evening and Saturday. At 2 o'clock onwards, the synagogues are closed because the men say their namaz, because you know the synagogues are looked after by Muslim men. But any other day from 9 to 5, please go and see them. They're very beautiful.
As to how she developed an interest in the Baghdadi Jews of Kolkata and how long it took for her to make this documentary film. What were the obstacles and hurdles that she had to overcome to make this documentary film, and if there are any particular memories that you would always cherish of the making of this documentary film.
Thank you, Dr. Aafreedi. First of all, my gratitude to Victoria Memorial, Dr. Sengupta and Mr. Raman for giving this opportunity and making space for the film screening, and thank you all of you for coming over and watching the film. Now, I would like to answer not in that order, but first of all, regarding the obstacle, frankly, the Jewish community has been so cooperative that there was hardly any obstacle. I mean, I am not talking about financial or monetary obstacle, we are keeping that aside, but in the production part of it, the community has been so proactive and so helpful in every way that there was no obstacle at all. How I got into this subject, it was through a friend of mine, Bengali friend, Smarajit, who lives in Delhi. He has married a Russian Jew. And so after marrying a Russian Jew, he developed an interest in Judaism. He did a lot of studies, and he shares some of his insights, some of his newfound knowledge with me. So one day he told me that why don't we make a film on the Jewish communities, the Jewish settlements in India. There are quite a few in Kochi, in Bombay, there are like that. So he wanted to, mobilize funds and speak to some of the influential people in Israel, etc. But it was not working out. So he said that, okay, since you live in Calcutta, why don't you start off with the Baghdadi Jews of Calcutta? They are your neighbors, so it should not be so difficult. So that's how it all started off. And so Smarajit actually pushed me into it in a way. And then once I attended that conference where Jael spoke, she spoke about the Recalling Jewish Calcutta at Studio 21. So that was my first acquaintance with Jael. And then when I got to know a little bit and I realized that it's such a small community and only less than 20 are left, I felt that visual documentation is important, it should be done. So that's how I jumped into it, and that's how the film was made. As for the amount of time, my first shooting I did in the summer of 2017. And in a way, actually, the film is still not complete, I would say. Our documented films are always like that. So I would like to add a small segment, because many people said that you haven't given enough importance to General Jacob here. He is one of the most, most well-known Jews in India, and he has a lot of contribution. So I was wondering how to give that, how to incorporate it into the narrative, into the tapestry. And just a few days back, I met a friend whom I knew a long back, but I didn't know about this interest, that he has done a photo feature on General Jacob, and he knows he had met General Jacob in Delhi and he had taken a long interview, etc. So I planned to take a small segment with, he's a Bengali friend here, so as what the photos of General Jacob and what General Jacob said when he met him in Delhi, etc. And I will include it. So a documentary film is that way never complete. So it's an ongoing thing, so maybe the next version will have that little segment also.
And are there any interesting anecdotes that you had while making this documentary film, whose memory you would always cherish or would amuse you?
Of course, the most memorable and spectacular thing, of course, was the rededication of the synagogue. So that was the most spectacular thing. And meeting all of them, going to their homes and talking to them, that was, I was very surprised that in one of the interviews, Flowers said that she had no idea about the persecution of the Jews that's going on in Europe till some of the victims came to India, as the American soldiers came, and she heard from them. Because this story here is so different from the story of Jews that we have grown up with. We have grown up reading a Diary of Anne Frank, or watching the Second World War films, or at the most Fiddler on the Roof. But the story of the Jews here is totally different from our preconceived notion of Jews. So that is one thing, I mean, that slowly I absorbed that differentness.
How one identifies oneself is not always the same as how one is perceived by others. Professor Jael Silliman has produced some of the best scholarly studies of the community she comes from. There have been a number of studies of the Baghdadi Jews, both in Mumbai and in Kolkata. Many of them are of quasi-academic nature, but her book, Indian Jewish Portraits, Indian Frames, it's considered to be the best scholarly work on the subject. In one of her writings, she writes that the term multi-locationality is what captures her identity best, rather than displacement. Baghdad, a number of reasons. And one of those reasons was that they wanted to escape persecution at the hands of Ottoman Turks. They were not alone in finding refuge in India. There were two other communities who came to India as refugees, escaping Ottoman persecution. And those communities were Armenians and Greeks. I would request Dr. Silliman to elaborate upon her notion of multi-locationality.
Oh God, that book is written so long ago. I don't really remember what I said at the time. So I'd say multi-locationality because Jews have always been a wandering people. Okay, that's historically. But even in our community, it was a community that was always on the move. We moved up and down what I call Jewish Asia with ease because we had brothers, families, outposts of businesses all across the diaspora from Shanghai to Calcutta. So Jews were comfortable wherever they were because they were in Jewish homes but connected to much broader hinterlands. Jews always had many different identities. For example, I'm just going to go off topic. For me, I'm Indian, I'm Jewish, I'm a feminist, I'm a woman of color, and all these things depend on where you are. So in Calcutta, it doesn't make sense for me to say I'm a woman of color. In the US, it does make sense for me to do that. So multi-locationality is one thing, and multi-positionality is another thing as well. So I think that I feel always that my identity shifts constantly depending on where I am, though it's very rooted in my Calcutta Jewish experience.
I would also request Mrs. Silliman to comment on this, that is it the same for her as well? Just as Dr. Silliman feels that the term multi-locationality captures her identity best, is it the same for you?
No, I don't think it's the same for me. I grew up at a time when I was very deeply rooted in Calcutta as a Jew, not as an Indian, as a Jew in India. Because at the time I was growing up, this was British India. And we were certainly not British. In fact, we were excluded. Sir David Ezra became a Sir, and so did Sir Romain Mukherjee. They both Sir Biren Mukherjee. They both became a Sir in the same year. And they said, now we can join the Calcutta Club, no, the Bengal Club, because we're now Sirs. They both applied for membership, and both were refused because they were not British. So you know what happened? Sir David Ezra owned the Bengal Club, so he said, please vacate my premises. And Sir Biren Mukherjee, at the time, with Sir David Ezra and others, founded another club called the Calcutta Club, where again they were not excluded because they were British or they were Chinese. They were only included because they were Barasabs, number one or the number two of a community. So their class was there, but there was no distinction. So I grew up again in a very Jewish Calcutta, and only when I went to Delhi to college, there was only 2 Jews in my college, and then I started realizing that I was an Indian, and I took part in all the parades and all the Quit India movements, and I shouted and I sang all the national songs, and then only did I become an Indian, if you know what I mean. In Calcutta, I was in a little nest, as it were, in a cocoon of Jews, and I had Jewish school teachers and Jewish neighbors, and everybody around me was Jewish. It was as if Judaism was coming out of my ears. And I wanted to fly away from it and see the rest of the world. And there I went to Delhi to Lady Irwin College, where again the administrator was Hannah Sen, who was Jewish as well. But it followed me, as it were. But then I was one of those people who wanted to spread my wings and see who else lived in India around me, not just the Jews around me. So I have a very different, so to say, way of what you said, a way of thinking about it.
I would also request Mr. Zachariah to respond to this question as to what he considers to be his strongest identity. We all, as individuals, have multiple identities. Professor Ahmad Sen has written extensively on the concept of multiple identities, and scholars are of the view that more than individuals, communities have multiple identities, and even more so than individuals. So what do you think can be best considered to be your identity personally as an individual, and what would you consider to be the identity of the community you come from?
You sure you want to know?
Yes, yes.
All right. I grew up in a town where we're the only Jewish family, right, in Jamshedpur. My father was there, we were there. We weren't extremely Jewish. We had Friday night prayers from time to time when all of us had time, when all the boys were home. And we had friends in school and our neighbors, and none of them were Jewish. So we grew up, me and my brothers, as Indians, as like everybody else, breaking mangoes off the trees, you know. There was no one to tell us not to. So when I came to Calcutta, to university here, that's when I came to touch with the Jewish community of Calcutta. They were my parents' friends, but my parents had left, and you know, they'd just come visiting from time to time over 20 years earlier. So I had to catch up with them, which in a way it helped because my aunt Rama Laddi was the principal of the girls' school, right? And she organized a lot of you know, events and lots of things that happened. There was the Maccabi, which was a sports club. Basically, we'd come to the girls' school lawn and play badminton and basketball and so on, and we'd meet each other. That's how I got to know the community. And then as I got to know people better and better, sadly, every time I got a girlfriend, within 6 months she'd gone to Israel. You know, and this was, but we still, there was a community. There still was a community when you had close friends who were Jewish. But I have always thought myself as an Indian, and I'm Jewish.
Well, a great emphasis is laid on the fact that the Jews never faced anti-Semitism in India, and it is China is another country where it is said that Jews were never troubled. Though, what is different about the Jewish experience in China is that the Jews don't exist in China anymore as a community. They assimilated in the general population. So, yes. So, this is something that is common to all minorities. While they aspire to integrate into the mainstream, they resist assimilation so that they can retain their separate identity. And Indian society helped Jews retain their separate identity. Indian Jewry is represented by 3 different communities and several Judaizing movements. The 3 Jewish communities are, of course, the Baghdadi Jews. They had 2 major centers in India, one in Kolkata and the other one was in Mumbai. Today there are only 100 Baghdadi Jews left in all of India, and 20 of those Baghdadi Jews live in Kolkata. As far as the total Jewish population in India is concerned, there is great variation of estimates. The estimates vary from 3,000 to 10,000, and there are reasons as to why there is this immense variation. But the proportion of Jews in India's total population is around 0.0004%. And numerically the largest of the 3 Jewish communities in India is the Bene Israel. Then there's the Kochini community. Only 6 individuals of the white community of Cochin remain in Cochin today. The rest have all gone to Israel.
And if I may interrupt, Dr. Aafreedi,
Yes.
Isn't that possibly the reason why there was no anti-Semitism in India? We were so small, nobody even noticed us.
This is exactly.
You know, there have been occasions when you say, you know, they say, "What are you?"
Yeah.
And they insist that you say what you are. And you say, "I'm Jewish." They say, "What's that? Like Armenian? Or is it like a Parsi?" And, you know.
Yeah, thanks so much for this introduction.
Also, don't forget that in our Indian society, we have a lot of people below us, right, who get beaten up, right?
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
Which is why nobody cares for it.
absolutely agree with you. So what helped the Jews in their experience in India were basically two factors. One was their numerical insignificance, which worked in their favor. And the other factor was the endogamous nature of Indian society. So this is also what helped the Jews retain their separate identity, which wasn't the case with China, where because of intermarriages, they assimilated in the general population, and this is something that did not happen in India. But what is problematic about this stress on the absence of anti-Semitism in India, as a highly acclaimed scholar of Jewish studies, Yulia Egorov, sees, is that there is an inherent anti-Semitism to this discourse when it comes from the Hindu nationalists. That, look, we as society have been so tolerant as to tolerate a people who couldn't be tolerated by anyone else across the world. So how would you comment on this? Yes.
Actually, Navras, I totally disagree with you here.
It's not my thesis. It is Yulia Egorov's thesis.
I think that India is, because Hinduism is such a amorphous, big religion, which there's so many kinds of Hindus and so many different kinds of people and so many different castes. Okay, I don't think it's monolithic in the same way, and I also think it doesn't have that history, that European history of Jew hatred that is really very, very deep in the European psyche. So I think that, you know, Jews and Christians and others have always survived here without a problem. Okay, things may be changing now, but I don't think the reason that we weren't persecuted is because we were too small in number. I think that many people like Parsis were very welcomed over here. They saw us as people, you know, like who had skills, who could contribute to the country and did. So I have never felt that. I've never felt an anti-Semitic feeling from people in India. Now, I know you've written a lot, it's so popular, and why the Hindu nationalists like him, but I don't think it's because of anti-Semitism. I think it's because of the notion of a common enemy, which happens to be the Muslim. So I think that's a completely different discourse. So I would say for me, okay, growing up in India, people may have asked me, what am I? And I'd say, I'm Jewish, and they'd say, what is that? But there was never with a sense of othering me in a way that was negative. I have to say in India, all my life here, I felt loved, accepted, and my Jewishness never became a problem between me, my friends, and everybody else. So I think that the Indian Jews, if you look in terms of what's happened to the Bombay Jewish community, which is an ancient community in India, and the Cochin Jews, the only time they faced anti-Semitism was during the Portuguese, when they came to India and there was anti-Semitism. So I want to say that as a Jew, you know, General Jacob, my uncle, was a general in the army. His Jewish never stopped him from being a general in the army, and this was even after the British. So I would say, let's embrace India for its anti-Semitism, and I could only say, let us hope that India continues to be an inclusive country, and that I think is what we have to watch against now and in the future.
I think it's also very important to put on record that the Rodev Shalom Synagogue in Mumbai was burnt. It was attacked and burnt by rioters during the 1993 riots because it was mistaken for a mosque. Yes. Well, the fact is that Jews and Muslims in India have produced beautiful examples of amity that you do not come across anywhere else in the world. Almost all synagogues in India are looked after by Muslims. All Jewish cemeteries are looked after by Muslims. Most of the students in Jewish-run schools are Muslims. Jews, yes, of course, today, I'm talking of the present, ever since most of the Jews left the country. And most of the Jews live in predominantly Muslim neighborhoods. So this is this is true at least for Mumbai. This is true for Mumbai and Ahmedabad. I was talking about interfaith amity. I was talking about Jewish-Muslim amity.
Please have your focus on Calcutta. Please have your focus on Calcutta.
Yes. Not part of the discussion. Focus it on Calcutta. Why do you bring a Hindu nationalist? It's ridiculous. Yes. Absurd. Ludicrous. It's extreme.
I think we would have a session, an interactive session, and then you would be free to ask questions, make your comments. Would it not be better that we conduct ourselves in a conduct ourselves in a civilized manner? You would have your time to ask questions and also to make comments. Why should you interrupt the discussion? Let me ask questions, the responsibility that I have been assigned, and attributing an agenda to me. Don't you think it's unfair? It is disrespectful to the organizers. It is disrespectful to me in person. It is also disrespectful to all those who have joined this panel.
We wanted to know about the Jews. We have come here to know more and more about the Jews.
Yes, but things need to be contextualized. Jews of Kolkata cannot be spoken about in isolation. How much time do I have? I realize we would also need to open the floor for questions.
I would ideally say that we wind up by 7:45.
Okay, we have 15 more minutes.
No, but then it has to be interactions from the audience also.
No. Is it for the discussion or also inclusive of the interactive session? Total. Total. Then I think it's time for me to open the floor for interaction.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Please.
May I ask?
There's another microphone coming here.
Please.
Hello. Long before this film was made, I was fortunate to have a very senior Jew person of Calcutta, Mr. Silliman, who was a very senior member of Calcutta Club. We used to sit together. Now, I'm surprised to know that he was the husband of Flower's Silliman. Please, a hand for Flower. Flower, be more frequent to our club. I think our club will be very happy to see you because we welcome, the city has ever welcomed other communities, at least very beautiful and sweet personalities like you. I'm Professor P.R. Das. I am very much interested in other communities who made a part of Calcutta, our urbanity. And Mr. Silliman used to ask me a question, how much do you know about the Jews? So I used to say at the beginning, as a small boy, I know about Nahums. As a elder boy, I knew about General Diane, Golda Meir, and the famous song Havana Gila, which I used to sing in Calcutta radio, and which has been used by Subha Das Mollick not in a voice of a Jew, but in the voice of Harry Belafonte. Am I correct? I have noticed that. Yes. I can still sing that song. I sang that song many times in the All India Radio, in my baritone. I please ask you people not to go from Calcutta. Bring all your friends who have left Calcutta back. Make a meeting, call us there, and we shall again be very happy to welcome you as Tagore has done. Debe ar nebe milabe milibe, jabe na phire. এই ভারতের মহামানবের সাগর তীরে থ্যাংক ইউ
A very simple question, but on a different note altogether. It is wonderful to hear about the Jewish history, especially of your experiences living in our city. Now I have a very simple question to the three who are we've seen talk and enact the story. How much of Bangaliana do you think you have absorbed in the long run in your life? Thank you.
I eat fish.
That's a good one.
I have to admit that I'm very bad at languages. I tried to do French in school, I failed in it. So I went to study Hindi, because at that time I was, Jai Hind, British leave, that kind of thing. And I learned Hindi with a Hindi master who I only had to start talking about Netaji, and that was the end of my Hindi lesson. You see. So, but I did study later in Delhi and other places. And in Loreto House itself, I made it a point of learning to read and write Hindi, which I can. But I'm sorry that I do not understand Bengali, though my father spoke it fluently, my brothers spoke it fluently. I did not understand it very well, but I'm glad to say that I do know how to read and write Hindi. And at one time in Jerusalem, it was very strange. I said, what a strange combination of languages. I know to read and write Hindi and Hebrew. I'm never going to use the two together. But as it happened, I did. I suddenly got a phone call one day from a company and said, do you know how to read Hindi? I said, yes. Please, we need you so much. So we went there. It was a map-making company. And I sat at a computer which was the size of this table. And the computer kept moving. And all I had to do was to read in Hindi the names of cities and towns and streets. And they were translating a map for Israelis in India, and they didn't want to do it from the English. They wanted to do it directly from the Hindi. Like in English, we'll say Delhi, and on the computer, it was Delhi, you see, or it was Jamalpur, or whether it was Mumbai, or whatever it was. They wanted the actual Hindi words and not bastard English pronunciation of the whole geography. So I did use it once. I was very proud to say that the maps that they use today was partly not translated, but I was part of the process of reading the Hindi on that old computer, and the map was translated directly into Hebrew. So I do not know Bengali, but I do know how to read and write in Hindi.
There are quite a few people among our community who speak Bengali, and they understand the nuances, they know about festivals, they participate. They do now possibly because there aren't too many of us left. But when there was a number of us, let's say when we were in thousands, there were a few, because as one of the participants in this said, that we would stick together. I didn't think it was a very good thing, but that's how it was. But today, yes, the Bengali, and I know that when I was in college, we had Bengali, because we had all our friends were from everywhere. I could even speak Gujarati because I had Parsi friends. So
I just wanted to start by congratulating all of you for making this not only fabulous film, but I think it's a contribution to civilization. It is so profound. And I speak as a daughter of Bengal, as a Bengali Christian. I'm used to be saying, what's that? I mean, how can you be Roma Bhattacharjee and a Christian? I'm used to that. But I'm really, really touched and moved by the way you have used visual memory and visualization to reconstruct the history of something that is forgotten, fragile, difficult to capture on film, and the layering of the visual history is absolutely marvelous, and I found it deeply moving, and I can talk about it the whole night, but all I wanted to ask was two things. I haven't met this word Judeo-Arabic before, so I'd like to know a little bit about what that means, and also as this whole business of multi-locationality and identity. I mean, having lived across 4 continents, I know what that feels like. My question is, did y'all have any contact with the community in Aleppo, or was that completely deracinated? Thank you.
To some extent, I can answer that to some extent, Judeo-Arabic. The Jews that lived in the Arabic world, as you say, was a large group from Syria. Sorry. It ranged from Syria and right down to Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and what is now Israel. It wasn't Israel before, it was Palestine. That was the Judeo-Arabic world, and it came originally because the second temple was destroyed, and the first temple was destroyed rather, and it was rebuilt, and the Jews were taken as captivity to Babylon. The Babylonians destroyed the temple and took us into captivity in Babylon. And this goes back to, I can't give you the exact date, but certainly for 500 years BC or more. And you must remember that all these people then started, they spoke a language which eventually was a mutation of Arabic and Hebrew. Till today, you will find many words in Arabic and Hebrew very much alike, and Arabic and Hindi also comes into it because the Muslims brought those words to India. So this Judeo-Arabic society is all these countries together. And they were a religious lot of Jews. The whole of the Bible, what's the word I want to use? The commentary on the Bible was written there, the Talmud. And they were considered the most religious people of all the Jews that went to other places. Jews went to other places after the Spanish Inquisition, and they went northwards to Germany. That became the roots of what was called the Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenaz means Germany. Therefore you get the word Nazi. Ashkenazi. Those were Jews who went to Germany. And the ones who came to Spain, Sepharad is Spain in Hebrew. So they came to Spain, and from Spain they were thrown out during the Inquisition, and they came right across North Africa into what we now know as the Middle East. So there was a Jewish tradition, a Judeo-Arabic tradition, stretching from Spain, Morocco, the other side of Spain, all the way to Turkey and eastwards to the Middle East. Because when the Spanish Inquisition happened, Turkey said, you don't want the Jews, we'll have them. You're very welcome here. So they trekked across North Africa, some of them leaving behind girls who got married and so on and so forth. It took many years, and that's how we had this huge community stretching from Morocco and one part of Africa right across to Turkey, and thereafter eastwards to Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan. Many Afghanistan people are actually Jews originally who've been converted. If you look at them, they look like Jews, but they've converted into Islam. Many of the Kabul people who used to be here when I was growing up, I used to look at them and say, but they look very much like my uncle so-and-so or my grandfather so-and-so. And my father told me, yes, they all came through that area and they were converted. So there's your answer to Judeo-Arabic, what the term actually means. Does that satisfy you?
Can I just explain a little more? It is Hebrew written in Arabic lettering. And at one point of time, Calcutta was the center of all Jewish, Judeo-Arabic printing in the world.
So Judeo-Arabic is more a cultural term, okay? They're Jews from the Middle East who's basically rooted in Arabo and Muslim culture, but with a very strong Jewish core. There was no dilution of the Jewish core, but we lived in the Middle East for thousands of years, and that's why I think we have such a close affinity to Muslims, because we share many traditions. When my great-grandfathers came here, they wore turban, they wore the Muslim gown, they didn't eat ham, pork, they had halal meat. So we were immediately comfortable with Muslims. So in our home, for example, or in Jewish homes, we always had Muslim cooks, because we made sure then that there's some level of kosher they understood right away. So Judeo-Arabic is a language, as Ian talks. It's a history, as my mother says, but it's basically a culture which is very distinct from the European Jewish culture, which has Yiddish as their language, which have different food, which have different traditions than we do. In fact, when I went to the States, I really didn't identify as Jewish at all, because I saw all these Ashkenazis and I'm like, what are they doing? I had no idea what they were doing. You know, their food was different, the way they chanted, the way they said their prayers was different. So basically, it's two very different kinds of cultures. And what's really nice is that both of them are alive and well, and both of them, very vibrant in Israel today.
You can take the reins of steering. I have a suggestion. Gets the next question. Can you make 1 minute observation for to the Jacob's soul, because he's 13. Excuse me. Whoever wants to say something, please raise your hand. There is a person who is controlling the discussion. So whoever you best for will take the mic.
Since General Jacobs passed away in the month of January on 13th, can we make a remembrance prayer?
You want to say a toast to General Jacob? Is that what you're saying? Yes. A prayer for General Jacob? Okay, you want to say a Hebrew prayer? No?
I know that prayer, but I would love if you...
Oh, minute silence for General Jacob?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sure. Thank you.
First of all, General Jacob was my relation, my husband's relation. He was my husband's mother's brother. So he was very much part of our family. I spent a holiday with him and my children. They were all very small in Deolali when he was commander there. And we had many, many good days together. And I would be delighted if you would do that, but I would like somebody else to.
Okay, let's just hold a minute of silence for General Jacob, who passed away. Thank you.
I would like to add another small thing that nobody knows about General Jacob. General Jacob and Zubin Mehta, who's a conductor, were part of the process of making India recognize Israel.
We are observing 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma. In that context, this fact is should be noted that Abraham Solomon Perulkar was personal physician of Mahatma Gandhi. He treated him during many fasts. That's all.
Though Jewish, but he was a Bene Israel, not a Baghdadi Jew.
Yeah, he was a Bene Israel. But he was a Jew.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes. No doubt about that. So, okay, there are a few. Can we take a few more questions? Okay, could you please have the mic for this gentleman?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. First of all, this was a wonderful day. Last week only we celebrated the birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda, who had said in Chicago that he belonged to a religion which has welcomed all persecuted minorities, from religious minorities from all over the world. And there he mentioned the Parsis, the Jews. So it was wonderful. That context is very, very nice today. And congratulations to Srimati Subha Das Mollick, for a marvelous eye-opener. Jews were our neighbors in Kolkata, and we knew so little and so little about them. So, my congratulations to you, ma'am, for a wonderful film. Wonderful. Now, for the prominent Jews.
Now come your 3 questions.
No, not a couple of questions only. First is about, what did you miss out on Nissim Ezekiel? He's a very prominent poet of the English language. Oh, it's not part of your... Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and
Actually, there were a lot of famous Jews from Kolkata, so I'd encourage you to go to my website. It's called jewishcalcutta.in, and if you look at the famous people from Calcutta, they're really giants. She didn't even mention many because she couldn't, because of the time of the film. But, for example, Ezra Mill, who was one of the biggest film producers in India and did over 700 documentaries, to photographers who led the way in photography, to the first Miss India, to actors, to actresses. So please, I encourage you to go there, because Shubha actually, I think, did a great job but couldn't cover everything.
Well, in fact, Indian cinema owes a deep debt of gratitude to India's smallest religious minority, the Jews, because almost all of its earliest female stars were Jewish. They were the women who acted in films, braving all the odds to their reputation and otherwise, at a time when even prostitutes would shy away from acting in films because of the taboo attached to performing arts.
One regarding Kolkata. Jerusalem, as you mentioned, the Zionism come. Now, do you think the dwindling strength of the Indian Jewish community is because of Jerusalem's policy? Still, they want Jews from all over the world to come over there. And I want to know about why this one single piece of land in Jerusalem is disputed by people, why people of three religions are claiming the same piece of land, which is a mystery to me. And regarding Calcutta, I'd like to ask you, since there's only 17 people over here.
This is out of the ambit of this documentary film. There were a few people there on that side who wish to ask questions.
No, one question regarding Calcutta. Now this dwindling...
Sir, please.
No, Calcutta, I want to know about this. The film is about
Sir,
Jews of Calcutta.
you have already taken more time than
Jews
anyone
of
else.
Kolkata,
Would you please let others also ask questions? Would you also
Relevant
let
to
others
because
ask
of Jews
questions?
of Kolkata. I want to know about the Jews of Kolkata.
But you have already taken your time.
Only one question.
Shouldn't you give others also the opportunity to ask questions?
No, Kolkata, your strength is depleting. Only 17 now. Does loneliness gets the better of you? Do you fear anxiety, depression striking you? That's what the question.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, firstly, I'd like to appreciate the effort put in by the makers of the film. It's quite informative, and actually, these are the two communities in Kolkata. I feel one is the Jewish community, and the other is the Chinese community. That I was curious about knowing more how they contributed to the city. So I feel like this answers a lot of questions for us in terms of the history of Jewish community in India and in Calcutta. So coming to my question, I think one little aspect that was explored in the documentary was the contribution of the Jewish community to music in Calcutta especially. So as far as I'm aware of, the Jewish community had a lot of contributions to the Calcutta School of Music and to jazz music, which was actually a very core to the city of Calcutta. So I just out of curiosity, can you speak a little more about how the Jewish community has had an influence and has furthered maybe jazz music or music in general in Calcutta? And that could be a... I'm not completely informed about this, but I know that in what I've listened to in jazz music, there are people from the community who've contributed. Now, names wise,
School of Music.
Bernard Jacob was the head of the Philharmonic Orchestra, and he was the conductor of the orchestra. His brother was also a very well-known violinist and cellist. There were also musicians from Calcutta who played all over India as well. And actually, there's a whole section on music in my archive too, so please do go and check that as well. In terms of jazz music, Ian would know more, but I don't know particularly jazz.
No, we had some drummers, name escapes me at the moment, but there were jazz musicians who played in bands in Calcutta and on Park Street, and who also went, and played abroad. And there were a few of them. Yes.
One thing, I don't know if any of you know the band Tears for Fears. It's a very big band. Manny Elias is a Calcutta boy, and he was the drummer for the band. And actually, he grew up in the house next door to me.
Oh,
so Manny is the most well-known player who now has an international reputation, and he lives in the UK.
Well, I wanted to say something. Yeah. I greatly appreciate your interest in micro-minorities. You mentioned that you are particularly interested in the Chinese and the Baghdadi Jews here in Kolkata. Presidency University, by the way, offers a course at the master's level titled A History of Small Communities of Foreign Origin in Colonial India, which is a study of 6 communities, and those 6 communities in alphabetical order are Anglo-Indians, Armenians, Baghdadi Jews, Chinese, Greeks, and Parsis.
Thank you for that information. And it was actually why I'm more curious is because I'm also interested in making films and documentaries as well. So one thing I really wanted to work on when I was in school was the Chinese community, a documentary on that. Now I think there are some that exist at the moment, but I feel like if the makers of this film can get more research on that community, they can make another film on that as well, if that's possible.
It's time for us to end the session. I'm most grateful to...
Can I just... It's not
studied there from 1965 to 1976, and there are many of my friends, the Aarons, the Gabbes, and the Hadis, everywhere, and they've all migrated to Israel. So I would just, since social media is so rampant these days, could you is it able for you to integrate them once again? One of my class teachers, when I was in class 2, Rama Maslia, she passed away in 1998, and during her 90th birthday, we were there, and there were many, some of my friends from Israel had come, and but there are many whom we, cannot, even if we reach out to them, we were so small at that time, say class 3 or 4, and they had migrated 1967, 68, 69. So we can't get to them. So if you can have them in together somewhere. Yes, I can.
I know the Hadis come here almost every year.
Sarah Salas comes. Sasun Cohen.
Good afternoon. Jews and Armenians both were in real estate business in Kolkata. Were there any competition between or any such of things in between these two communities?
I think they were very friendly with one another. I know there's a great story about the races. They were also both great horse racing people, and they both used to own Queen's Mansions and Park Mansions, which used to go, one races would belong to a Jew, the next to the Armenian, because they would actually bet their buildings against one another. But yeah, they were very good friends. And in terms of real estate, the Nevi Shalom Synagogue was first, the property for the Nevi Shalom Synagogue was given by an Armenian gentleman for Jews to use. So they actually have played a very, very supportive role, because they were here much before us, the Armenians. And so they were very supportive of the Jewish community, and both were, had lots of real estate in the city. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that's it, is it? Yeah, fine. So let's give them a big hand, please, for the film, for the discussion, the panelists, the moderator. And Dr. Aafreedi, I would like to apologize for the unwanted interventions that came in here. Because there are some people who are compulsive questioners or compulsive talkers, and we cannot stop them sometimes. Right. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fascinating experience. I'm sure that the discussion will go on in smaller groups later on too. But at this juncture, before calling it off, may I request Jayanta Sengupta to kindly hand over a memento on behalf of the Victoria Memorial Hall. First, to the senior most person, Mrs. Flower Silliman. Then to the next senior person, Mr. Ian Zachariah. And then to the filmmaker, Subha Das Mollick. To the moderator, Dr. Aafreedi. And last but not the least, to Jael Silliman. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a safe passage home. Good night.